This time of year is one of my favorites because I love being in the water. And my favorite water to be in is a lake. I think I like it best of all, even over the ocean, even over a beautiful pool. I think an Adirondack lake, there's nothing better. Well, I had a close encounter with one this week because one day this week I woke up at 3 a.m. and couldn't go back to sleep. I had a busy brain and just could not get settled. So I waited until it started getting bright, and then at 5 a.m. I got up and I thought, what should I do with this extra little bit of time? So I drove to Luzerne and I parked and went into the lake all by myself. And the sunrise was beautiful, and I swam around that island, and I felt so spiritually at peace. You know that feeling that can happen in nature when you feel so like one with everything? I was like, oh, there were loons to watch. And I was imagining people waking up in their cottages and wondered what they were going to do that day. I just felt like, oh, here I am in the dance of life with nature and humanity. Well, I went swimming somewhere else another time this week. I went to Haviland's Cove. Now, that's a Glens Falls institution. For those of you who don't know, that's on the Hudson River, where the water is still beautiful and pure and Adirondack-y, and that's where a lot of people go. So it was a whole different experience. It was also fun. There were people, having a little barbecue. I could smell charcoal briquettes, which brings back memories of my childhood. There were little kids splashing in the water. There were teenagers flirting and chasing each other. And then someone put a boombox on the lifeguard's chair and blared music with what I thought was questionable language, frankly. And then I started thinking, whose kids are those splashing like this? And of course, probably other people were like, isn't that the priest from St. Mary's? What's he doing here? Ugh. But that was exactly what Haviland's Cove is. It's a melting pot of all of us. Everybody goes there, no matter who you are in Glens Falls. You could run into just about anybody. And I think that is a dose of medicine for us, especially for those of us who spend a lot of time online. Social media is making us kind of isolated. It puts us in, some people would say echo chambers. Maybe you've heard instead the idea of a silo. We're in silos. We're not hearing from people that have a slightly different view than us. We're only hearing from the people who feel the same way we do. And the problem is, it's designed that way. So the more we click on something, the more that kind of stuff gets fed to us. And now you don't even need to click on it. Maybe you've noticed you can't even hover. If you hover for too long over something on YouTube, you'll get a whole bunch of that, whether you want it or not. That's why my mom one time asked me to buy something for her that was, only for women of her age. And I go, Mom, I can't buy that for you on my phone. You're going to ruin my algorithm. I'll be getting all the wrong advertisements for things that I couldn't possibly want. So the thing is, if we don't break out of those silos, we're never going to be able to follow what Jesus says is the real plot of life. He says life has a plot, and it is that you love God and you love the people that God put around you. That's the plot of life, is you have an adventure of loving God with all you have to give and of loving the people around you. And so we have to consider that is not the same thing as saying the plot of life is to go to church once a week and then to buy whatever you want online. That's not the plot of life. The plot of life is not to go to church once a week and then spend the rest of the week online raging at the people who see things differently than you do. No, that's not the plot of life. The plot of life is to love God with your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength, and to love your neighbor the way you love yourself, which is wonderfully, powerfully, strongly, but not as much as you love God. God's number one. The rest of us right below that. So it's interesting that he doesn't talk to us today about how we treat our friends. Most of us do a pretty good job treating our friends well, or else we wouldn't have any. But the real question is, how do we treat our neighbors, those people a step beyond friend? The people that were near us during our errands today. The people that might be laying on a towel not so far from us at Haviland's Cove. A lot of us choose to live in places where the people around us are like us. You know, a lot of times you know that by we choose the school district that we want to live in before we choose anything else. What kind of kids do I want my kid to be around? What school district? What street do I want to live on so that my neighbors are a certain way? And in many ways, there's nothing wrong with that. But is that potentially going to stop us from fully doing what Jesus is talking about today? Could that cause us to lose the plot of loving God and not just loving the people like us, but the people that God created that are very different than us? Chicago is a city of neighborhoods, and one of the things that the leaders of Chicago know is that it's pretty concentrated in each of the neighborhoods who lives there. People tend to live in Chicago with people just like them, which can be a wonderful thing, but can also be a little problematic, because what happens if you have to drive through another neighborhood to go where you're going? People might look at you like, what are you doing here? So a woman decided she wanted to do something about that, and she did something called the Folded Map Project. It's exactly what it sounds like. She took a map of Chicago, and because of Lake Michigan, it's spread out kind of north to south. So she went to Madison Avenue in the middle of the city, and she folded the map in half. Because Madison's where all the street numbers start. Everything starts at 1 north and 1 south. So if you're on Bishop Street, for example, if you go 10 blocks north, you're in the 1000s of Bishop Street, North Bishop. And if you go 10 blocks south, you're at the beginning of the 1000s of South Bishop. You get it. So what she did is she folded the map in half, and she plotted where people lived, and she gave them information. Do you know that your exact opposite neighbor, when you fold the map, is this person who lives at your address, but at the south location or at the north location of your street? There's a little bit of that in Glens Falls too, right? There's some streets that are like that. Have you ever thought about if you live at 10 Haviland's Cove Drive, who lives at 10 South Haviland's Cove? Who lives at the other side of your neighborhood? You know, I guess here we're very clear about the East End and the West End. Very strong neighborhoods with strong identities. Have you ever thought about who lives exactly as far from Fountain Square as you do on the other side? So that was the next step of the project. She got people together who were what she called map twins. And there's one story of these map twins. They lived at Bishop Street in Chicago. One of the map twins was Wade and Jennifer, a couple that lived at 6100 North Bishop. And they got together with Nanette, who lived at 6100 South Bishop. They got them together just for a little meet and greet. And of course, they were very different because, like I said, in Chicago, where you live really determines what kind of group you're a part of because everybody seems to live together. So Wade and Jennifer, for lack of a longer explanation, were what we maybe used to think of as yuppies. You know, I don't need to say any more, right? You can picture that. Nice tree-lined street. They like certain nice wines. They know they can taste if the food is organic or not. This doesn't taste organic to me, sweetheart. I don't know. Right? You know what I mean? Nanette lived exactly at the mirror image in South Chicago. And she was a single mom in a drug-ridden neighborhood. And you can picture that story too. Those are easy stories to kind of caricature. Well, after they did the meet and greet, they were one of the pairs that liked each other right away. And so they became kind of close, and they stayed in touch, and they would like get coffee a couple times a year, and they would check in on each other. So one of the things that happened was Nanette wound up getting a loan and opening her own consignment shop in South Chicago. And it was the first time she'd ever owned a business, and she was wanting to make sure that it would really succeed and thrive. She was putting her all into it, and she was doing it as parents do for the future of her kids. And so Wade had his 58th birthday party around the time that she was doing her grand opening. So he had all of his friends go to the consignment shop, and they rented it out for the night. And they had his birthday party at the exact address on the south side instead of the north side. And there's actually a YouTube video of this. It's so joyful. They're map twins. They're not friends until now, but they're neighbors. It's the same city. It's the same street, but they didn't know each other. A lot of the people at Haviland's Cove I wouldn't have known. Many of them don't go to St. Mary's. They don't even go to church. They don't know much about me at all, and I don't know much about them. But it's good for us to be together. It was good for me to be in the water with people who were so different. So here's the question. Can you imagine who your map twin might be in our community? Who is that person? What do they look like? How do they vote? What is their life like? If you looked at the framed pictures in their house, who's in those framed pictures that are on the bookshelf? Do they look like the framed pictures in your house, or do they look different? It's interesting because we've gotten to be so diverse now as a world population that it's really hard to just identify with your own people. You know, when I was looking up statistics of how many people in the world are American, for example, it's 4%. Out of 100% of the world population, 4% are American. So then I thought, well, you know, traditionally, people who've lived in Glens Falls a long time, the Catholic people would always call this the Irish parish. Do you remember that? This was the Irish parish, and St. Alphonsus was the French parish. And many of us now, of course, have a background in either of those or both. Well, so I thought, what percentage of people are Americans of Irish descent? And you might not be surprised to hear that it's 9% of Americans have strong Irish ancestry, 1 in 10. That's a pretty good number. But that means that Americans with an O in front of their name or a Mick or something like it are about 0.4% of the global population. So we're a minority. So is everybody. That's how the world is now. We're all minorities. And all of us are being invited to consider, how could I live this gospel more fully if I worked just a little bit harder to get to know who is my neighbor?